Tēnā koutou katoa, numa hara mai ki te whare te wahi mahi e Aotearoa, ko Hamish McDougall aho. Greetings everyone. As the Executive Director of the New Zealand Institute of International Affairs, it's fantastic to welcome you here today on this beautiful Wellington morning. It just goes to show that you can't beat coming to an Institute event on a good day. So thank you very much for coming. And a special welcome, of course, to our guest speaker, Dr. Jung H, Deputy Assistant Secretary at the US Department of State. And I also welcome Your Excellencies, Heads of Mission, members of the New Zealand Institute of International Affairs, including a number of our life members here today, and other attendees, all other attendees, and those joining us online. Thank you very much for joining us. It does seem very timely for the Institute to be looking afresh at the challenges posed by the Democratic People's Republic of Korea, because it does seem that headlines about Korea have perhaps dwindled from the dwindling number of New Zealand news outlets in the past couple of years, partly presumably because of the relative lack of information and people coming in and out of North Korea. But also, you know, there are other crises, of course, around the world, in Ukraine and the Middle East and so forth. And we might hear a little bit later about how some of those other crises are affecting the situation in North Korea. But this doesn't obviously make North Korea any less important to understand. It's a region of the world which is really important for New Zealand's interests, both economically and security-wise. So we're very glad to be able to address this today. We're particularly privileged to welcome Dr. Park because she has a very impressive CV that also makes one feel slightly envious. She's got a history PhD from the University of Columbia and has taught US history in academic circles. And I'm displaying a personal bias here, but I would suggest that there isn't an international issue that wouldn't benefit from greater historical understanding and of understanding of the historical method. So, and I think that's as true of Korea as anywhere else. But she's also worked in intelligence at the Central Intelligence Agency and in the National Intelligence Council, primarily working on Korea issues. More recently, she was a senior fellow at the Brookings Institution, focusing again on Korea issues, and has written a book called Becoming Kim Jong Un. But she's now the US State Department official responsible for overseeing relations with Australia, New Zealand, and the Pacific Islands, and also serves as the US senior official for the Democratic People's Republic of Korea, all of which, of course, makes her expertly positioned to speak to us today. And I'll shortly invite the Deputy Assistant Secretary to speak for approximately 15 minutes or so, and she'll be followed by a discussion led by Professor David Cappy. Many of you will know David. He's, of course, the Director of the Centre for Strategic Studies here at Tihiranawa Victoria University of Wellington, and he's one of the foremost experts on international relations and security studies in New Zealand, so we're very grateful that he has joined us here today. Now, this is, of course, part of a long-running conversation that we have at the Institute of around 80 events a year, and I'll just do a little plug for some of the upcoming ones. On this time next week, I think in the very same room, David's team at the Centre for Strategic Studies has US Undersecretary of State Bonnie Jenkins. Clearly it's the season for sort of senior US visits. And then on the 11th of March, we've got former Prime Minister Helen Clark in conversation with the Executive Director of the UN Population Fund, talking about sexual and reproductive health rights. And then on the 20th of March, we have the EU Envoy for the Indo-Pacific. And on the 1st of May, for members, we have our national AGM and annual lecture, which will include, we hope to announce shortly, a speech by a senior government minister. So very much welcome you here today and to all the upcoming events. But without further ado, I'd like to introduce you to Dr. Park. Thank you.
Thank you to the Institute for hosting me and Dr. McDougall for that kind introduction. Within the State Department, I'm dual-hatted as the U.S. senior official for the DPRK and Deputy Assistant Secretary for Australia, New Zealand, and the Pacific Island Affairs. So I'm very happy to be with you here today in New Zealand to discuss DPRK issues. Of course, the DPRK continues to be one of the most pressing security issues we face in ways that are increasingly global in reach. So when I started this job, I didn't realize that I would also be a Russia expert as well, and I'll explain that. I want to leave plenty of time for questions, so I will provide just a brief overview of where we stand, as well as the efforts we are undertaking in response. To be frank, we find ourselves in a very difficult environment, and the situation has only grown more complicated over time. First, the DPRK has continued to prioritize its nuclear weapons and ballistic missile programs. Among other things, the DPRK has announced plans to mass produce tactical nuclear weapons and to develop advanced capabilities like solid fuel intercontinental ballistic missiles, hypersonic ballistic missiles, underwater nuclear attack drones, and military reconnaissance satellites. And we have seen them maintain a rapid pace of testing in pursuit of these goals. These efforts to develop nuclear and ballistic missile capabilities stand in open violation of multiple UN Security Council resolutions passed over the years, and they pose a grave threat to our partners and allies in the region, to the global non-proliferation regime, and to the international community more broadly. It's also funded through a wide variety of illicit activities, including cybercrime, totaling in the hundreds of millions of dollars or even billions of dollars that target governments, businesses, and individuals around the world. Second, in late 2023, the leader Kim Jong Un overturned decades of official policy by rejecting the concept of eventual unification from the Republic of Korea or ROK. This has been accompanied by an uptick in hostile and threatening rhetoric against the ROK and the dismantling of symbols and organizations dedicated to inter-Korean cooperation. Finally, as I'm sure many of you have seen, the DPRK has deepened its incredibly dangerous partnership with Russia. Due in part to our sanctions and export controls, Russia has been forced to seek out new sources for military goods, and in the DPRK, it has found a willing partner. The DPRK has already sent ballistic missiles and thousands of containers of ammunition to Russia. And Russia has used these weapons in its brutal war of aggression against Ukraine. These transfers are, of course, in blatant violation of UN Security Council resolutions, which Russia itself has signed up for. We can say with near certainty that the DPRK is not providing these materials for free. In exchange for its support, there are indications Pyongyang may be seeking military assistance from Russia, including fighter aircraft, surface-to-air missiles, armored vehicles, ballistic missile technologies or production equipment, and other advanced technologies. Russia could also provide various forms of economic and diplomatic support, sheltering the DPRK as it evades sanctions and develops its unlawful weapons program and threatens its neighbors. As all of this is happening, the DPRK remains largely isolated from the rest of the world, having failed to fully lift the strict border closure it imposed in January of 2020 at the start of the COVID-19 pandemic. And it continues to reject our repeated offers of dialogue, which we have provided in public and private, direct and indirect. Its decision last September to release Private Travis King, the US service member who crossed into the DPRK without authorization, was a welcome development, but unfortunately it has not led to broader engagement. So what are we doing in the face of all this? First, let me say clearly that our ultimate goal remains the complete denuclearization of the Korean Peninsula. And we continue to believe that the only viable path forward is through dialogue and diplomacy. And to that end, we will continue to message and do outreach to Pyongyang. that we wish to resume dialogue without preconditions at any level and on any topic of concern. In the meantime, we will continue efforts to deter DPRK aggression and strengthen extended deterrence. U.S. commitment to the defense of the Republic of Korea, Japan, and other allies in the region remain ironclad. We will also continue our efforts to slow the DPRK's weapons advances by enforcing existing sanctions, rolling out new ones, and cutting off its illicit sources of revenue. We have expanded our engagement with like-minded governments and industry partners on the DPRK's malicious cyber activities, identifying ways to work together to choke off this revenue stream. We also continue to work with the international community to raise awareness of DPRK human rights issues, document violations and abuses, counter DPRK transnational repression, and increase the flow of independent information into, through, and out of the DPRK. Last year, we were able to return DPRK human rights issues to the UN Security Council's formal agenda for the first time in 6 years, highlighting the inextricable links between the DPRK's unlawful weapons programs and its human rights violations and abuses. And we continue to support international efforts to provide critical humanitarian aid to the DPRK, independent of progress on denuclearization. This is most evident in our ongoing work to quickly review applications in the UN 1718 Committee from organizations around the world planning to deliver life-saving aid to the DPRK. In all of these areas, our efforts are strengthened by the cooperation of our allies and partners around the world. And here I will note that New Zealand has been an exceptionally strong partner on DPRK issues. For example, joining a statement in January condemning DPRK Russia ballistic missile transfers, coordinating with us on sanctions enforcement, speaking in support of the UN Security Council session on DPRK human rights that I just mentioned. It's a very long list, and we are grateful for its efforts. I will leave it at that for now, and I look forward to your questions.
Thanks so much, Dr. Tuck, for those really useful and helpful framing remarks. I wonder if I could start with, there are obviously a number of different parts to the challenge that the DPRK poses. But I wonder if I could start with the question of the revenue sources that you mentioned in your remarks. For those of us looking from the outside, obviously there's an extraordinary sweep of UN sanctions against the DPRK, but yet we still see the capacity to generate new weapon systems and to of the kind you mentioned. You mentioned cyber. Could you give us a bit more of a sense of just what those kind of techniques and practices are, and what specifically is being done to try and combat that?
Certainly. Thanks, David. Great question. This is a line of effort that we've devoted a great deal of attention on. DPRK cyber capabilities have grown in leaps and bounds. For example, and we've been working very hard with our partners, Republic of Korea, and we recently started a trilateral cyber dialogue with Japan. So that relationship has been very important. So let me roll back the reel a little bit. I was at the National Intelligence Council when the DPRK did the hack on Sony Entertainment. If you remember, in 2014, they had hacked into Sony Entertainment and demanded that the movie, The Interview, I don't know if, raise of hands if anybody's watched it. Yes. And said that this interview was an affront to the regime. Just a quick summary of what that movie was about. It's a couple of two ne'er-do-wells who are hired by the Central Intelligence Agency to go into North Korea to assassinate Kim Jong Un. You can see how that might be provocative. But since then, and so this was the first time that we had seen DPRK attack a private U.S. entity. And in the intelligence community, we were able to identify the culprit pretty quickly. Since then, and as a result of the COVID pandemic, you know, how the attack surface has grown exponentially during COVID. When everybody went online, all the platforms expanded, and that was a prime opportunity for the DPRK to deploy its resources and its expertise that they had been cultivating over the years to generate revenue for the regime. Some estimates of the DPRK's revenue streams are in the billion or a couple of $1 billion. And they have no views about attacking friends or foe. The United States has been a victim. They've hacked into banks, cryptocurrency exchanges. It doesn't matter if you're Vietnam or Sri Lanka or poor or rich country, they will attack where there's a soft underbelly of systems that are not well secured. The State Department website and the US Treasury Department has various websites, but let me just point out a couple of things about DPRK tactics here. One, we're worried about the malicious cyber activity, and that's the hacks for espionage to hacking into banks. But we're also worried about the DPRK IT workers. These are DPRK educated, technologically savvy workers who are deployed and they get real jobs, earning real paychecks from companies and using real platforms that we use. And so they'll get these jobs and they'll use the back door to try to steal intellectual property, any technologies from the companies that they're working for. And so we have released a 6-seal advisory in June of last year to show some of the methods that the DPRK has been using and ways that companies, industry, individuals can protect themselves. Another line of effort that we've made sure to do is that they're very focused on journalists, anybody who covers think tankers. I've also been a victim, think tankers or journalists who cover Korea issues, where they've used AI to improve their efforts to attack these targets. So it's a big deal. I would strongly encourage everybody to practice cyber hygiene, but it's a key line of effort for us and for the Republic of Korea and Japan. And I know that this is something that I will scream from the mountaintops as an evangelist for cybersecurity measures.
Thanks very much. Obviously, one of the key players in terms of enforcement of sanctions, and the state has been talked about as playing a pivotal role in whether or not there is effective pressure against the DPRK is one I'm not sure you mentioned in your remarks, and that's China. It used to be said that if China turned off North Korea's oil, it would be sort of on its knees within a few days. And there have been, in the past, some signs of that kind of pressure. But obviously, US-China relations over the last 5-10 years have cooled significantly. Can you talk a bit about what you see as China's role in terms of whether or not it's doing what it needs to do to make sure that sanctions are enforced, or what more China could do in view of the United States to make sure that sanctions are effective?
China has a huge role to play. They share a very long border, hundreds of miles. And trade and China's relationship with North Korea, I mean, China accounts for over 90% of North Korea's trade. So there is a huge economic dependency and political dependency that the DPRK places on China. China, as a UN Security Council member and as a member of the international community, has a role to play in implementing sanctions, making sure that the DPRK refrains from a nuclear test, refrains from its very provocative activities on its ballistic missile programs, and in the transfers of weapons to Russia. So we continue to engage the PRC at all levels, from the president, the secretary of state, and all the way down to myself, to make sure that, and to keep pressing Beijing to do what it should be doing to play a positive role in restraining North Korea.
You mentioned Kim Jong Un's decision to reverse that long-standing position on reunification. And you've written an excellent book on Becoming Kim Jong Un. And obviously one of the huge challenges for anybody trying to make sense of North Korean decision-making is just the black box, the impenetrability of that. But how do you try and explain that shift in, it's a significant shift in position? What do you think motivate that, and what do you think its significance is in terms of peace and stability going forward on the peninsula?
Yeah, it's clear that the DPRK is not interested in diplomacy, and we'll keep pressing on that. But the DPRK has not engaged with South Korea, despite efforts, and the latest statements, the harsh rhetoric, jettisoning reunification as a goal. I see that as potentially laying the justification for potential actions. We don't see any signs of an attack or a conflict in the near term, but this is something that we are obviously on the lookout for, given that this is a live issue here. So I think that the DPRK has been clear; it's not interested, and it's been very focused on their weapons development. But we will continue to press for dialogue, even as we press forward on extended deterrence.
Thank you. And then maybe just one last question, and I'll open it up to the floor. So, great to see some hands up there. Good to see some enthusiasm up there. I guess I wanted to ask a big fundamental question, and that is denuclearization. CVID, I think, was the acronym for a while: complete, verifiable, irreversible denuclearization. With where we are today, as much as that would obviously be a good thing, is that still a realistic thing to aspire to in this case?
Denuclearization is our goal, and it will not, and we're not going to veer away from that. I think maybe flip it over. It would be unrealistic to accept North Korea as a nuclear weapons power. The idea that a country that has left the global non-proliferation treaty, the NPT, the fact that it has flouted UN Security Council resolutions to develop these weapon systems, a country that has proliferated weapons technologies. I mean, it wasn't that long ago that they had a whole list of weapons and technologies that they had proliferated to some problem areas of the world, including the Middle East. The fact that it is now supplying weapons to a Security Council member for use in an unlawful, brutal, unprovoked attack against Ukraine. When you think about all of those things and what kind of lessons other countries might listen to, I think there's no way that we can be talking about accepting North Korea as a nuclear weapons power.
Okay, thank you very much for that. I've got 2 hands up already, and so if you can try and catch my eye, I will ask a question. I encourage the students who are here to ask questions as well. Please, lady in green top.
Thanks, Rebecca. So we've been trying to get the DPRK and encouraging other countries to get DPRK to reopen its borders. So far, they've been very focused on exchanges, high-level exchanges, and high-level visits with Russia and China. And various European countries and other countries have diplomatic missions that they've had to abandon back in 2020 during the pandemic, or 2021. And so those, and from our perspective, it's really important that the borders reopen. So it's great that the German delegation was able to go in, and would strongly encourage the DPRK to continue to open its borders. We've been focused on the border for a variety of reasons, but we also want to make sure that the humanitarian assistance is getting in. So you have 40% of people in the DPRK are undernourished. Last time I saw, 1 in 5 children under the age of 5 are stunted because they're just not getting the nutrition. 8 organizations are the ones who are providing childhood vaccinations, and now you have 4-year-olds running around the DPRK without childhood vaccinations. The health system is not great. And so for our part, we had offered COVID assistance because we wanted to make sure that the DPRK was not a disease reservoir, and it's the right thing to do to provide that kind of assistance. So all that to say is that we hope that this is a harbinger of greater opening by Pyongyang, because I think it's really important, at least on the humanitarian perspective.
Yeah, that gentleman up there. Sorry. The gentleman in the grey shirt.
This question might sting a little bit, but I'm just curious about the State Department position. If there is a point that President Trump will be the next president of the United States, correct? Because he said to one of his campaign that if the NATO allies doesn't pay its bills, then the NATO allies doesn't deserve to have the protection of the United States. So how would that comment, and how would you comment that you said on the Reuters that any diplomacy that is made by the DPRK, excluding Russia, is beneficial? So how would your comment and comment the president assure the United States allies, including Japan, South Korea, that the mindset of President Trump that he would not withdraw or maybe reduce the troops in Japan and South Korea will not happen because he already translated it to the NATO office. So what is the assurance of the Asian office?
Thanks. The election season is in full swing, unless in case anybody has missed that in the United States. It's early yet. I think we still have a bunch of primaries to go through, and I'm not going to get into the election politics. So from our perspective, with the U.S. Indo-Pacific strategy, we've been very focused on creating a lattice work of multilaterals and groupings of partners who can do various things. So for us, it was very important for us to strengthen the trilateral relationship with the Republic of Korea and Japan, and the political courage and the leadership of Prime Minister Kishida and President Yoon have been critical to making sure that the DPRK is deterred from additional activities, provocative activities, and the trilaterally we do a great number of things together, as we do with New Zealand, Australia, and many countries around the world, friends and other allies. So I think given the threats that the DPRK poses, the fact that we have various theaters that had not been linked before, so we have the war in Europe that has a nexus with the DPRK WMD program. I think it's incredibly important now more than ever for us all to be, as an international community, to be working together and cooperating. And I say that particularly in light of the growing alignment and relationship between DPRK and Russia. That is not a positive development, and it's not something that I would encourage. And the fact that our view is that PRC can do more to implement sanctions fully, and to really provide a positive role, play a positive role in this situation, not just on DPRK, but clearly on the Russia issue.
Thank you. take some questions from this side, and then we'll come back over here.
Yeah.
Please, this lady here.
Sure, thank you. So over the last few years, we've seen the reduction significantly in the number of escapees from North Korea. I'm wondering what the sort of international and US response to that has been, and whether the international community is pursuing the opening of those alleyways for people to leave North Korea, given the human rights violations and significant poverty.
The DPRK, thanks for that question. It's incredibly important for us and a big line of effort for us. The number of defectors coming out of DPRK since Kim Jong Un came to power has plummeted. And of course, during the COVID years, I think it was in the single digits, or maybe low double digits. And so I think that goes to show the extent to which Kim is afraid of the outside world and what that might mean for the DPRK. And given the border closures during the pandemic, it's been very difficult for anybody to cross those borders. We continue to call out the DPRK's human rights violations. We have a Special Envoy Julie Turner, who was confirmed a few months ago, who's been a crusader for DPRK human rights. From our perspective, the human rights violations are intimately connected to the weapons programs, in that Kim relies on human rights violations to be able to continue to pursue his weapons goals. Kim has chosen to divert resources away from his people toward the unlawful weapons program. So we'll continue to press on that. We're also continuing to call on China to not send back and forcibly repatriate people, DPRK or North Koreans who don't want to go back. And so it's a tragic issue. And of course, we support Japan in their efforts to resolve the abductions issue. There are several individuals, Japanese citizens, that the DPRK abducted in previous decades, as well as South Korean POW families and others who are missing and have been taken to DPRK against their will. So there's a lot there. We're not just focused on the weapons program, but we're very much focused on the human rights as well as the humanitarian issues.
This gentleman here in the grey jacket, please.
Thank you, Lloyd. I know you repeatedly talk about cyber activity and concern in cyberspace, and especially at the moment with China and TikTok being also a concern. So my question is, how concerned should we, the US and small Pacific countries, be concerned about malicious cyber activity coming from DPRK, and what implications that could have for us as small countries?
DPRK reserves its most hostile rhetoric for the United States and for South Korea. However, it doesn't care who you are or what country you're from in terms of its cyber activities, because those can be done under the cover of night, and it's virtual. So right. But cybersecurity, from our perspective, it's like COVID. You're only as strong as your weakest communities. And so we have been very focused on making sure that we prepare and educate individuals, students, but also industry, as well as other governments about the threats that DPRK's cyber activities pose. And so this is not just the US or New Zealand or the UK or the big countries that we're worried about. We're also worried about smaller countries and poorer countries. And so, because they don't really discriminate. They will hack into the banks, they will hack into to the accounts of individuals who they think have information or access to information. And so, I think overall, you should be concerned about cyber activities in general. I will also point out that DPRK activities are so sophisticated. They're among the top layers of sophistication, China, Russia, and other actors. They're so sophisticated that one industry person has said to me that if you solve that problem, you can solve every other problem. So it's something that we strongly encourage, and for government officials and industry folks out there, let's be in touch in terms of what we can do to collectively make our systems, our digital ecosystem safer.
Thank you. This gentleman here, and then I think I'll come over to this side of the room.
Thank you, Dr. Bach. My question is more to do with the theory of international relations. So I'm just curious to know, would you consider the current international system to be unipolar with the US as the preeminent economic and political and military power? Or do you think it is non-polar with the emergence of supranational entities like the EU and also China? And what implications would it have on the Department of State's assessment of how to deal with issues around the world?
Thanks. I said in my opening remarks that I didn't think that I would be a Russia person, or that I would be talking about Russia ever, except in very limited sense. And I also didn't think that I would be talking about cyber in the way that I just answered your question. I also didn't think that I would be talking about climate change. And all that to say is that some of the huge challenges that we're facing are cross-regional and transnational, and things that we can't solve alone, which is why it's so important for us, and you've seen us do this with New Zealand, Australia, the Pacific Islands, with Korea, Japan, the Southeast Asian countries, NATO, European countries, bilaterally, multilaterally, minilaterally, to try to solve these problems. We all have different skill sets, which is why it's important to draw in the best athlete for a particular issue. And so, from State Department's perspective, that's what we've been very much focused on, to make sure that we partner with the best athletes, and to increase capabilities of other countries, so that we can tackle these really massive, oftentimes existential problems and challenges that we face.
Can I just follow up on that, and maybe in a slightly less abstract way, but thinking about the way cooperation is playing out in the United Nations system. Obviously, the Russia DPRK connection means the Security Council won't be moving anywhere anytime soon on some of these concerns. But you mentioned that human rights is back on the UN agenda for the first time in, I think, 6 years or so. Are there parts of the UN system where you're seeing still some action and some movement on DPRK issues?
There's always action on DPRK issues at the UN, because we're very much lashed up with the UN system. It is worrisome when you have two permanent Security Council members who are willing to turn a blind eye to ballistic missile activities and weapons transfers and proliferation. By our count, in 2022, DPRK did 69 ballistic missile tests, all banned. Last year, they did 20-something ballistic missile tests, including multiple ICBM tests, all banned. The cyber activities are also banned, because these are entities that are related to, or working under the auspices of banned, sanctioned DPRK entities, their military entities. So all of that is, and this is why we work so hard, why we crisscross the globe at the State Department and elsewhere, to make sure that we're strengthening the international systems and the rules, and trying to shore up what has kept peace And this region has had peace for a very long time. And so it's a worrisome development when you have Security Council members who are kind of looking the other way. That's why it makes expanding our group of like-mindeds is so important.
Thank you. This lady here.
Hi, I know you wrote a book about Becoming Kim Jong Un, and you talked about how North Korea has kind of victimized people. I was wondering personally if you had received any hate from North Korea after writing a book, or any personal attacks from North Korea itself.
No personal attacks, but as a think tanker, and as a U.S. Government official, we're always on extra super duty watch in terms of cyber issues and in terms of security kind of counterintelligence type of efforts. Yeah.
Okay, this gentleman here, please.
Hello, thank you for the talk. I apologize, this question may be a bit broad, but I was quite interested to hear what it's like engaging and talking with North Korea, and maybe how they're more difficult than other countries, and then maybe what choice you found into this cooperation that you got.
New Zealand is the easiest country to work with. So North Korea, so we haven't had any diplomatic relations with the DPRK, and as I mentioned, they've been for as long as I've been in this role, they've locked down their borders and refused to engage the United States. I think, for us, dialogue and diplomacy is true across the board, and of course it's difficult with DPRK when we don't have we don't have diplomatic relations. They refuse to talk, and that we've had to. Sweden is our protecting power, and so not having that direct dialogue and diplomacy is a challenge. As a diplomat, of course, I enjoy talking to people and working with colleagues from other countries, and with of course, there are lots of good things that we're doing, and there's lots of alignment. But part of my job is to talk things out and negotiate and compromise and to explain why we're doing what we're doing and be transparent. And to create these relationships that I think are really meaningful. And we've had a very strong and long relationship with New Zealand. And we want to make sure that all of that needs tending. This is not something that you can look away and just think that it's going to go well. And so we're very, very focused on increasing engagement with the region, increasing our engagement with the Pacific Island countries. Increasing all the good things that we're doing with New Zealand and with Australia and other partners.
The lady in the blue shirt.
Thank you for your discussion. It's extremely interesting, and just off your previous point. So, a big thing of the New Zealand election is also that in the Pacific, and also just New Zealand-China relations, as well as Pacific relations to China, is the role that China has in the Pacific, as well as the US and New Zealand where we stand. So do you see the potential of, if China grows its presence in the Pacific, that North Korea could potentially enter that space as well, or is there any discussion going on around that with that?
Let's see. So our approach to the Pacific and to Australia and New Zealand is that there's lots of work that we need to be doing to tackle some of the challenges that I laid out, but also to increase the capacity of all of our partners. For the Pacific Islands, we've had 2 presidential level summits with the Pacific Island countries. And we've made a series of commitments to the Pacific Island countries. Climate change is a huge issue, so we work with New Zealand and Australia and other countries through the partners in the Blue Pacific and other mechanisms to work for our people. And as you've all heard the president say and others, that the United States is a Pacific country and we have a long history in the Pacific. So we'll, so there's lots of work to do in this region. On DPRK, so I see DPRK's relationships kind of getting puckered up with Russia and China. They used to have lots of, they've been closing down a few embassies and diplomatic posts in the past year. And so their economic trade engagements and diplomatic engagements have really puckered up over the past 3-4 years during the pandemic. But I don't really see the DPRK expanding its footprint in the Pacific. I think for them it would be about revenue generation, and for them currently cyber seems to be the biggest way that they're doing that. That said, the Pacific is not immune to DPRK's malicious cyber activities, and so that's something that we're all, of course, focused on as well.
Thank you. Just here.
Many thanks for your comments, including your comments on the American commitment to the denuclearization of the Korean Peninsula. And I want to follow up on the earlier questions about concerns that partners in the Indo-Pacific and beyond have about American security guarantees. Just this week, Alex Sikorsky, the foreign minister of Poland, mentioned that some countries would begin thinking about acquiring nuclear weapons if they couldn't rely on American security. That there are concerns not just about possible change of administration, but also what's going on in Congress at the moment and may continue to go on. And when pressed on the issue, he said he wasn't talking about Poland, but he had in mind Japan and Korea. I wonder if you could offer your perspective on this point.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, no, I think, I think, I think Korea and Japan have reaffirmed their commitment to the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty and their commitment to global non-proliferation, and we're very tightly lashed up on the DPRK denuclearization issue. I'm not going to get into speculations about that, but all we do is extended deterrence. That we in Northeast Asia, we've bolstered our defensive military exercises. We've lashed up military capabilities and interoperability. We have increased the visibility of strategic assets in the region, and all of that to show our ironclad commitment to our alliances with Korea and Japan, and to deter North Korea's. If North Korea is entertaining any thoughts about launching any attacks or starting any conflict or escalating the situation in the region and beyond. So it's our job. It's our job to keep our people safe, and we're very serious about extended deterrence and making sure that our allies and partners and friends all know that.
Thank you. We're going to finish by going up this aisle here, and I'll start with this lady in the red jumper, and we'll finish, if we have time, at the very top.
Hi, thank you. I know we're talking a lot about cybersecurity, but I work in the provision of IT services. I'm very interested. Do you think that in the Pacific, our personal policies at the moment are adequate? It's a concern that's been worked on. Do you think we're in the right place with our policies currently, or do we need to do better?
I think, the emerging technologies and cyber issues, and you probably know better than I do. I mean, they evolve so quickly, right? So I don't think this is we got it done and that's it, and we walk away. Same with cyber actors. They adjust their techniques based on where they run into walls, right? So I see it as that it's an ongoing process of protection and building capabilities and capacity building, and not an end goal, because I think it's going to continue to evolve. There's no way of stopping these technology and the evolution or the adaptation of those activities to get at our systems.
Thank you. Lady on the far right.
What do you think caused Kim Jong Un's stance to change from the year of election? Do you think it had something to do with the changing of presidents in South Korea and their sort of the different stance between those being more open to it and the new South Korean president hitting harder? Or do you think it also reflected Trump or the change of Biden or a more general global trend to call that?
Yeah. So the hostile rhetoric against the Republic of Korea is not a surprise. I mean, that's what they do, right? They lob, terrible things about the Republic of Korea, depending on who's in power. They've also lobbed terrible things at U.S. presidents and U.S. Officials and our policies. And so, and with it's a losing proposition to say that you definitively know what's driving certain things, but it's probably all of those things, and part of the motivations and the drivers. But what I think is that they're laying down a higher bar, right, for engagement. But I'm humble enough to say that that's have probabilistic language in that, which is to say that they might be thinking that way versus that's what they're thinking, and that's really important trying to in the DPRK. If you're studying DPRK, that you always have to be flexible in the way you're thinking about motivations and drivers, but it also means that you have to be ready for any kind of situation.
Thank you very much for visiting New Zealand, Dr. Park, and thank you especially for sharing your thoughts with members of the public. My name is Colin Keating. I'm a former New Zealand ambassador, and my connection with this issue that you've been discussing is actually 30 years from this month, when I was working with Madeleine Albright, when we were both ambassadors in the Security Council, establishing early sanctions against North Korea. Now, I think the fact that that is 30 years, and a lot of the people in this room weren't even born then, and the fact that you have, I think, rightly explained that the pathway forward now is probably still as bleak as it was in 1994. It leads me to ask you a question about whether the pathway forward may somehow be linked to the final diplomatic solutions that have to be reached over the future of Ukraine, and a reset in a new way of a relationship between Russia and the United States. Because I think you're right that North Korea has now got a new president, and that will protect their diplomatic interests as long as there is estrangement over issues in Eastern Europe. And maybe there is a connection, a link, a big diplomatic solution that needs to be put together, and a way forward for North Korea as a part of it. As you mentioned, Ambassador, this has been a long-running problem, and we're consistently and very focused on trying to work on try to resolve this issue. What I'm happy about, though, what I'm very confident about, though, and makes it less bleak, is that we have more capable and more partners than I think we've ever had, and that we have grown our list of partners that we wouldn't have thought about 30 years ago, and that
the international community is pretty much connected on denuclearization. They agree on the denuclearization of the Korean Peninsula as the ultimate goal. We have been successful in really reducing the number of proliferation partners that the DPRK has. We've been successful in working with Korea, Japan, and other partners on the cyber issue. So it's an ongoing situation. It's a work in progress. But for students out there, and for I would say that you should study what you want to study, because you never know what issue is going to keep popping up, right? So I'm not sure that, I personally did not think that the Russia relationship was going to be as strong as it is now. But it's something that requires more research, more thinking, more problem solving, and to see how the East is connected to the West, how the Indo-Pacific is connected to what's going on in Europe and elsewhere, and that all of these issues that we're facing, and DPRK happens to be at the nexus of a lot of issues that we're tackling. I'm pretty confident that we can tackle this together.
Well, unfortunately, I can see there are plenty more hands that were still going up, but I'm afraid we've run out of time. And so maybe it's not necessarily a positive note to finish on, but a less bleak note to finish on. We'll certainly take that. It's been a terrific discussion, wonderful, traversed so many different topics with remarkable clarity. So thank you very much, Dr. Park. And I'll hand back to Hamish.
Thank you so much for a really stimulating discussion. Thank you to everyone for coming and for some really well-considered and thoughtful questions. Thank you to Professor Kapi. We're always really grateful for your time and benefited tremendously over a number of years from your work. So thank you for moderating, and a special thanks to Dr. Jung Park. Really one line that really stuck with me actually is if we address the cybersecurity issues, we can solve nearly all the other issues. So I think that's among the key foods for thought in your talk. But if we could just thank the Deputy Assistant Secretary in the time-honoured way. Thank you.
Thanks. Thank you, everybody. Thanks.